TopMedTalk.
Hello and welcome to TopMedTalk Down Under. I'm Kate Leslie and I'm here with my co-host Andy Cumpstey at the Australian and New Zealand College of Anaesthetists and Faculty of Pain Medicine annual scientific meeting in Brisbane, Australia. This is our last podcast for the meeting, Andy. I'm feeling a bit sentimental already because we've had such a fantastic time.
I can't believe how quickly the time has gone, Kate. I mean, I know we've been busy. We've packed a lot into a few days and it's gone really quickly, but it's really been fantastically good.
So the meeting had really a large number of components and we tried to tap into that with our podcasts. There was the workshop program, there was the fantastic lecture program, a really good research component with posters and presentations and prizes, the networking in the healthcare industry reception where our sponsor, Southampton, formerly known as 3M Healthcare, was right next to us in our booth, but lots of other exhibitors. And then, of course, the social program. And then we had a great introduction to the meeting in Cairns next year at the same time. So we tried to capture that in the podcast, and we did so many. We're going to disappoint our podcast interviewees if we don't mention all of them. But who would you like to kick off with?
I think obviously ANZCA and the College and Faculty of Pain Medicine have put so much into this that we should definitely start by thanking the outgoing president, Chris Kokis, and the incoming president, David Story. They both gave up their time and it was a really busy event for them to spend some time sitting on the couch with us and looking back at what's been and looking forward at what's going to come, which is very exciting. Following on from that, it was really quite inspirational, really, to hear about the Emerging Leaders Conference and speak to Shannon and Claire about their experiences of that with Mark and kind of put that in context of the big kind of leadership picture that the college is doing so well here in Australia and New Zealand.
Leadership has never been more important worldwide in anaesthesiology with all of the threats that we've got to global health, to sustainability, workforce, the war on drugs, the double war on drugs that we heard about. So I think we and other colleges and societies worldwide in anaesthesia and related specialties are doing a lot of work in leadership. I think it's great.
And you mentioned the global health and sustainability there as well. We spent a lot of time looking at that both in the meeting and also in our TopMedTalk conversations. And I think I definitely learned a lot from those conversations, particularly about the fantastic work that's been going on in Mongolia that the college and many Australian and New Zealand anaesthetists have been working towards with some really impressive measurable results.
The interesting thing about that was how a group of people can go in and support local practitioners to improve mortality so spectacularly in such a short amount of time. Really fantastic. But on the other side of the coin, the terrible problems that people are having in those countries securing drugs. We heard about how much an ampoule of propofol costs in Port Moresby in Papua New Guinea. Apparently $20 or $30, where it's 90 cents in Melbourne.
Astounding.
Absolutely
astounding.
Yes. The other thing we learnt about quite a lot was about sustainability. And that was a really big theme at our conference. And the good thing about that, Andy, is it includes our trainees. Is much going on like that in the UK?
There's a big drive about this in the UK, and I should give a bit of a plug to some colleagues in Southampton, but there's a lot of work been going on from Mary Slingo and her mum, who've been driving this sort of forward on the international stage with lots of recent publications and editorials through the PJA and other journals. And that's been picked up by the college, and there's now a new working group forming together to push this forwards. But it's been really impressive to see just how well that's permeated through every section of this meeting, as you said, from trainees right through to plenary speaking, right through to our conversations. But even the Gilbert Brown Prize had some sustainability projects which are being published as research papers. So again, quite inspiring for people to see that research doesn't just have to be in a lab. It can be in a lab, of course, but it doesn't just have to be in a lab. You can do lots of other really impactful projects and get them noticed on the international stage.
Particularly if you do them just below the summit of Mount Everest, we heard.
Absolutely.
So Dan Martin, our professor and chair in Plymouth in the UK, was one of our keynote speakers. And he and actually my co-host Andy have done a lot of work in the Himalayas. What are the key things that Dan said that impressed you in his talk, Andy?
So I've known Dan a long time and we've done many of these trips together, but I think the key thing that he mentioned this time really was when in his plenary talk he was talking about rolls of the dice and how he says he's had a very fortunate career and he's been taking these opportunities, and at different points he's been at a fork in the road and not really known which way to go, and actually it's worked out really well for him. But he's very modest and he's playing that down. He's worked incredibly hard to get to where he is, but I think it's really inspiring to see just what you can achieve in a career that's not purely clinical, but alongside that. And I mean, he didn't even mention in his podcast about summiting Everest. He just talked about the UK ROCKS trial, and I'm really looking forward to see the results of that coming through soon.
That's a high and low oxygen in intensive care trial.
It is, and you've got the Mega ROCKS trial here in Australia and New Zealand, which is, I think, nearly recruiting 40,000 patients. So when we get those two trials through, over 50,000 patients worth of data looking at high and low oxygen in critical care, that's going to be a huge leap forward for our specialty.
We also had some interesting conversations about pain medicine with the outgoing Dean Kieran Davis and the incoming Dean Dilip Kapoor, and also with the two pain medicine visitors who were Vivian Torfik and Hans Clark.
That was a really interesting conversation.
It was, because we started out talking about drugs, and pharmaceutical medications, and also drugs that are used recreationally. And there's a lot of work going on there. But then I think we really pivoted to what's more important, which is the therapeutic relationship that all of us can have with our patients in the perioperative period. Talking to them beforehand to make sure we know all about their history, including the traumas that they might have experienced previously that are going to affect the way they respond to more trauma in the form of surgery, and the various methods that we can have to settle them down and to try and improve their outcomes, like mindfulness and meditation. I found that really interesting.
And we can't forget the research elements as well. As we know, TopMedTalk is the broadcasting arm of evidence-based perioperative medicine, and research is fundamental to many of what we discuss in these conversations. And we've had a lot of excellent conversations about the research during this meeting too. So we've had a paediatric session where we heard about a number of excellent paediatric trials, some of which we'll be reporting soon. Susan's hamster trial, looking forward to seeing the results of that when that comes out in the near future. But also a really excellent breaking trial session with Laki, Jay and Stefan, which again you can tell us a bit more about, Kate.
Yes, so Jay Darville told us of the results of the CHEWI trial, which is a randomised non-inferiority trial of chewing gum versus ondansetron to treat post-operative nausea and vomiting in female patients. And he revealed to us that chewing gum is inferior, or it's not non-inferior to, in fact, it's both inferior and not non-inferior to ondansetron. So that was kind of disappointing, because we were looking for I was one of the co-investigators. We were looking for a cheap orally administered medication for post-operative nausea and vomiting. But nevertheless, Jay learned a lot about how to run a large multi-centre trial, and we've, provided another piece in the puzzle about PONV. And then Lockie Miles told us about the results of his NATO observational trial. It was a prospective cohort study. Lockie was looking at iron replete and iron deplete people who were not anemic. And they had the same outcome. In fact, the people who were iron replete had a little bit worse outcome, which was very unexpected. So we had a great conversation with Lockie about known knowns, known unknowns and unknown unknowns, and that was really informative. And then finally we talked to Stefan Dierleman about his DEX2 trial, a multi-centre international trial that was looking at a high dose of dexamethasone in cardiac surgery and in younger patients. I was pleased to see younger was aged 75 and below, and that showed no difference either. And that study was really interesting because it used a novel trial design that involved a standard care group without consent, which was approved by the ethics committee, and which may be a method that we use in the future. So I love the breaking trial session. It's one of my favourites.
And it's been really interesting to follow that journey through, hasn't it? So we've not just talked about the trials, but we had a really, really good session about publishing with some of the top editors in the world in anaesthesia journals. So Matt Wiles and Jim Rathnell, who flew in literally for 24 hours for the meeting from America, which is in itself quite impressive, and we were honoured to spend some time with us talking about that. And we've just had another really interesting session now, chatting to Jamie Slay and Deborah Cully about delirium and the EEG, but also making us think differently about some of the research and how we do it, and our whether we're going for the individual treatment effect with our trial or the average treatment effects, and what we should be going for.
And Deborah, in her talks, always connects the science back to patients, and in particular members of her family, which I think provides a great context and sort of texture to her talks that I find very engaging. Unfortunately, she sort of gave us great sort of evidence that there's not much evidence that we can actually use to alter our practice, but it's definitely something we need to watch.
And I think that's a good topic to push into the social programs briefly before we finish, because we had, as has been a fantastic social program throughout the whole week. We mentioned the gala dinner, we've mentioned the fellows graduation presentations, but also the ANZCA Foundation and the amount of funding that generates for the Australian New Zealand Clinical Trials Network and some of the brilliant work that's been doing over the years. And we heard from an actual donor one evening who've put a lot of this money in to support that work and what they benefited from seeing that work being done, which was a really nice, touching moment as well.
It was. The foundation raises money from fellows and other philanthropists, and we give out a couple of $1 million a year in small grants that fund single centre studies and also pilot and survey work that supports our multi-centre trials. And that seed funding has resulted in our trials group netting more than $70 million from the major national and international funding bodies. So it's a real thing. From little things, big things grow. But our foundation director, Rob Packer, also talked to us about the power of conversation, which has come up a lot in our podcast, and about how talking with donors about what they want to get out of being a donor to our foundation and how to best align them with a grant or a scheme. So we're also looking forward to the last session, which is a Graham Norton style, panel discussion. I'm not sure if there'll be any gin in our coffee cup, but I'm hoping not. I think that'll be really good. What are we going to say, Andy?
Well, I think the power of conversation is what we need to talk about, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, the theme for this meeting was limitless, and I think all these different conversations we've had have shown that the power of conversation really is limitless, actually, and that's where we can go with the session this afternoon. And we should finish by mentioning next year's meeting. So that's 2nd to the 6th of May 2025, I believe, and that's going to be in Cairns next time for the annual scientific meeting. And the theme for that meeting is future-proof. So again, looking forward to that. I think it's a good way of moving on from here. And I'd really encourage anyone who listens to this, whether it be a trainee or a fellow or a consultant around the world, to come and visit that meeting in person. I think the amount of networking, and everyone's been so fantastically welcoming at this meeting, but being here in person and bumping into people and chatting about these ideas, it's such a really brilliant experience. And if you're thinking about it, you should do it. I should also thank Southampton, who were formerly 3M Healthcare, for supporting TopMedTalk and supporting me being here. And we should also thank ANZCA and the Faculty of Pain Medicine for supporting TopMedTalk Down Under and making this a really fantastic stand in a really good part of the healthcare exhibition and a big part of the meeting.
Well, thanks, Andy. You can find this podcast and all of our other podcasts on our website, on our app, on our socials, and in the ANZCA ASM daily newsletter. So it's goodbye from me.
And it's goodbye from me. See you in Cairns.
TopMedTalk. Thanks for downloading TopMedTalk. Don't forget to subscribe, check us out on YouTube, and of course on social media. We're on Instagram, Facebook and X. Also, it's important to remember that TopMedTalk is the broadcasting arm of EBPOM, evidence-based perioperative medicine. We'd love you to find out more about that, and the way to do that is ebpom.org. Check out our website and find out about some of the incredible conferences we're going to be arranging across the year. ebpom.org.